streaming service can be a bit iffy, I think is the word, technical word. And we're live on Twitter Periscope, Facebook ×2, LinkedIn, and YouTube has just come in. So welcome. What we're going to do today is a rerun of the social media news from yesterday, because as Gary F. and Heidi and a few others pointed out, the sound was crap. Another technical term. And what I wanted to do today was focus on some news that's coming through again about how bad social media is for society and how it's, if not causing every problem, then it is definitely supposed to be exacerbating it. Let me know what you think in the chat. I will show it on screen, of course, if you do. So let's start with the news and let's build this narrative arc and maybe come to some initial conclusions. So the first thing that I thought of when I saw this starting to explode everywhere was stories like the breaking story of Jensen Karp, who said that there was a shrimp towel in his cereal, and it's all been about how badly Cinnamon Toast Crunch handled the crisis comms, and then that's a bit blur. We'll do that. And then, and as I guess what happens in social media is we figure out our values, our community values versus our personal values. Thanks, Gary Hayes. I appreciate the feedback. As we sort out the difference between our community values and our personal values, is that things shift and change like a pendulum, which, by the way, is how things should be. We should take a stance with a small amount of knowledge, and then somebody rebuts it or gives us more knowledge, and we shift our perspective and our beliefs and our values, and then we're told more information and we shift back again. And this is when you see people saying, I don't understand, I'm very confused, I'm getting all this different information. Yes, you're meant to be. This is the time when we're sorting things out. I like to think of social media as humanity's evolution in the early teens, at that little grumpy stage because nothing's quite right and being quite clear. So things have gone from being on Jensen's side to being against him. He's now been accused of lying, stealing a podcast concept, shaming a former sex partner, among other allegations. So it's kind of interesting because what we see with social media is, and the algorithms pick up on this, it's called authority ranking. I think Google took authority ranking and put it in the knowledge vault of SEO. And then there's YMYL, your money, your life. Who is giving the information on your money, on your life, on your health, wealth, well-being? And there's an authority ranking attached to the person giving the information. And because we're human, we mix up two things. We mix up the, I guess, the end result or the topic or the genre and the expertise with the values of the person themselves. And here's the thing, because we're in the early teenage period, we're diving between two extremes. That if somebody does a good job, it shouldn't matter what they're like in their personal life. And then if somebody is an absolutely toxic CEO or a toxic politician, and we're going to get to that, then it absolutely does matter. It doesn't matter that they're getting the job done or that they're fulfilling their electoral promises or they're fulfilling their promises to the board. If they're toxic, then that will damage the brand. And social media absolutely has a key part in that, because the democratization of social media means that it's no longer in the hands of the press, who are negative Nellies. If it bleeds, it leads, always with the negative story. And it's not in the hands of PR, which is always positive and holier than thou and that sort of spin. So the challenge going forward that social media adds to the burden of, but also provides the solution to, is competing channels of information. Let's move on, or I'm going to be here all day ranting about this, because this is one of my topics. One of the things I like to talk about. Yeah, go read it. If you're interested, go and read it. But it's about crisis comms and it spins like a top, which is quite often the case. He said, she said, and then people outright lying, people trying to mitigate negativity, people trying to exacerbate, mitigate the negatives, exacerbate the positive, and vice versa. So why did I put my website up? Let's not do that. So then we were watching a video with David Pakman. Let me see if I can bring this up in a different way. Maybe this one. Okay. So David Pakman is a political commentator in the States. He's got a popular YouTube video channel. Probably going to get ads. No, I'm not going to play ads. I'm sorry. Google, you're just really annoying. But he's asked by one of the callers, is social media a net positive or net negative for society? So that's example number one that's doing the rounds at the moment. That's from yesterday, the 29th of March. What are you telling me? System that doesn't tell me anything intelligent? Okay, that's fine. I also noticed that Asmongold, so this guy's a political commentator, this David Pakman. If you don't listen to him, he's a left of centre, pro-democrats, I don't know, calls out the Republicans on different things. But that's an interesting video to watch. Is social media a net harm to society? And if you look at the resources that I put up online, I always try to do a blog post and link to everything in case you can't read it on your little iPhone screen or something, so you can go there and have a look. The other guy, Asmongold, is a commentator on games. So he's a gamer and he swears a lot. He's very out there. And this is not his most popular channel. So he's only got 238 million views on this channel. His most popular channel is on Twitch. And he does like highlight videos and things like that. And I was watching one of his videos, and I'll link to that one as well, where another subscriber asked him if he thinks that social media is positive or negative. And this was yesterday as well. There's always something in the zeitgeist where I seem to trip over lots and lots of this stuff going on, where people are asking somebody else a question. The two fellas here struggled a little bit, but they were very much of my mindset, which is people are the problem and social media is the channel for delivery, which exacerbates the problem. So it's not that we didn't have the problem before. It's that social media puts a spotlight on it. Well, actually, what it does is it puts a billion pin lights on people and their values, community values, personal values, and things like that. So whether that Jensen Cinnamon Toast fella is an alleged troll or not, I don't know. I'm not that interested in the specifics of it. If I was dealing with the crisis comms scenario, I would be. But there are deliberate trolls, and then there are people who just disagree with you, and they can be quite outrageous in their disagreements. So if you've ever spoken to someone who votes differently than you, or has a different religion than you, or follows a different football team than you, or has a different idea about climate change than you, or a different idea about education than you, they can look like trolls, but they're not necessarily. I always think of a troll as being either usually deliberately trolling, deliberately being negative, for a number of reasons. One is for attention. One is for humour, as bizarre as that humour may be. However, if they're trolling because they truly believe in what they're saying, then I don't see that as trolling. They might be misguided. They might be a little out there with the way they communicate, but they're not necessarily trolling. So let's keep going on this. So we've got here a gamer talking to another gamer about whether social media is good or bad. We've got political commentators talking about whether social media is good or bad. And then I saw something else, and I don't know whether I'm going to be able to see this in my stream or not, but it was on Twitter. And thank you, David. I saw something in the feeds about a politician called Andrew Laming. You're going to have to stick with me. I don't prepare all this stuff ahead of time. What's Paul Buongiorno saying? I wonder if I put it on another screen. I think I did. I did have it ready. You know, sometimes I'm just such an idiot. Let me have a look and see if we can get this into here. Okay. Did I lose it? This is about Belolo. Oh, here we go. So the Liberal Party politician, can you see that clearly? I'm having trouble with my OBS. Oh, there we go. Yes, you can. Liberal Party, which, if you're watching this from America or anywhere else in the world, is actually our right-wing party. Don't ask me why they're liberals. I probably looked it up once when I was at school and forgot all about it. But the Liberal Party, the right-wing party, politician Karen Andrews is telling RN, Radio National, repeatedly that she will look at women's safety and women's security. And if you're following this from overseas, we've recently had a situation where women are starting to come forward that they've been abused at our Parliament House. That would be like staff in the White House in America saying that they've been raped, one woman was raped, and that they've been abused or in other ways not felt safe and not felt secure. What it is that makes us unsafe and insecure remains a mystery. Well, actually, it's not. She's being sarcastic. So the party that's in government is saying it's a mystery that the women are unsafe and insecure, and then what she actually does, this politician, is she says social media is the reason why women are not safe and not secure. It's not the fact that, I don't know, politicians, political advisors and other mostly male staff in Parliament House are abusing women online, offline and everywhere else. It's the fact that there is such a thing as social media. And we are so going to get into this in a minute. Morrison government Home Affairs Minister flags anonymity on social media as a problem, which is odd given that her own colleague Andrew Laming attacks his constituents on Facebook using his own name. So if you've not been following the story, Dr. Andrew Laming is a politician who allegedly took photos upskirting, take a photo underneath the skirt of an employee at an organisation that he was visiting. I'm not 100% sure why he was visiting, whether it was for like a meet and greet and shaking hands, or whether it was something else. It's one of those things, it's like he just shouldn't have done it. I don't care what his excuse was or what he thought he was doing at the time. And he posted it on Facebook under his own name. He's not denied it, and he's currently on health leave because of it. Probably being a sexist, misogynistic asshat is a disease, and he's taking a cure for it, which apparently is training, some sort of mentoring and empathy training. Yes, our politicians need empathy. So here's the thing. When I started off as a social media manager decades ago, we actually insisted on anonymity online because it kept people, women and gays and blacks and anyone who comes in for a caning from the white male privileged sector, it kept those people safe. So we banned people if they use their own name. Why? Because if you write online, "Oh, Silk Charm, you're an idiot. I'd like to," I think, what did one guy say? "I want to kill your cat." Well, first of all, Silk Charm is not my name. And secondly, I don't have a cat. I'm actually allergic to them, although I like them. And thirdly, that meant he didn't know where I lived. He didn't know my real name, and he couldn't search for my information so that he could enact his pixel threats in real life. So anonymity keeps us safe. I worked in the Middle East we built an online community. So I helped build the community and set up the community management tools for NBC4, which is the women's broadcasting channel. I don't know what it's called today. It was called MC4 then. And one of the really important parts about security for women in the Middle East is that they were allowed to not use their real name. And when your reputation is everything in a culture, you can't risk posting anything that may come back to bite you on the bottom later. And can be twisted, I guess, and things like that. So keeping women safe, and it was very important that we do this in the community. We used a lot of behavioural modifiers, like when you got to the community, the logo was of a woman wearing a hijab, but once you're inside the community, which was for women only, no hijab. So it's a visual cue. If you're not from that culture, you may not understand, but men are very embarrassed and don't like to be in a space where women are like the women's part of coffee shops or an online service that's purely for women. If it was Australia, we'd have a whole lot of guys waltzing in and abusing the women and getting booted out. That doesn't tend to happen as much. So keeping women safe, keeping people safe through anonymity was important. And then Facebook came along and insisted we had to use our real name. They actually have in the terms and conditions that if you don't use your real name and we ask you for your driver's license, birth certificate or whatever, and you can't provide it, you will lose access to that account. If that account is then the admin of Facebook groups and Facebook pages, you will lose that account as the admin of those pages. And I always find it interesting when I see companies and they're clearly using a fake personal ID, which you're just not allowed to do. The second thing I want to point out, so we talked about the anonymity aspect, but the second point is, I don't know how to say this. I've said it a few times lately, and I'm just going to repeat it. I think the biggest trolls on the planet are media and politicians. They come from adversarial. Oh, by the way, they're the same group. If you get to know the politicians and their journalists, you understand that they work together. They're the same community. But heritage media has as its motto, if it bleeds, it leads. That's LEDES, in case you were writing it up. I'm not sure if YouTube's transcription service will pick it up, but it's LEDES, leads. And so everything has to be divisive. We went to person A and they said it's not a problem. And then we went to person B and they said this is the biggest problem on the planet. And we're providing you with impartial information. I do think that journalists confuse impartiality with adversarial. So it's kind of curating different points of view for you to make up your own mind. But then, of course, we have opinion-led pieces which seem to dominate media or particularly drive traffic. So media are never going to reject the big opinion leaders of the time because they drive the traffic, they drive the eyeballs. Human beings don't react to impartiality. Vanilla corporate impartial voices bore us stupid. We like the Facebook page and then we never see their stuff again because there was nothing there to engage us. There was no voice as such. Politicians also live in an adversarial world. They have to be. They're combative. The language is always for this kind of tribal behavior, whether it's journalists or politicians or sports is another one. It has to be warrior-like, warlike. So the voice has to incite, to be passionate. If journalists are impartial, then politicians have to be partial. They have to be passionate. They have to take a view. Quite often, they have to take a view they personally don't believe in, but it's presenting the social contract of that particular community to the public. So a journalist will be partial but has to provide impartiality, and then they get into trouble because they tweet their partiality, but then the article is impartial, as if we can't be grown-ups and present something, even if we disagree with it, in an impartial way and then turn around and be partial somewhere else, passionate somewhere else. Politicians have to be passionate about everything. They often have to be negative, especially if they're in the shadow ministry. They have to be negative about the incumbents. And whether they feel like it or not, maybe they agree with them. You know, we do occasionally have agreement. I thought we had great agreement during the pandemic. It didn't really last. But initially in those first few days, that was pretty awesome. The way that our passionate adversarial politicians came together. So what I guess I'm saying here is Karen Andrews flags they're not anonymity, and then her colleague Andrew Lambing attacks his constituents on Facebook using his own name. What was particularly interesting for me when I was listening to Karen Andrews and I was listening to a couple of the other, in this case, Liberal ministers, is that even the women would not be negative about Andrew Lambing or the things that he did. All the things that he's done, all the things he's allegedly done. What's that story about pushing a kid over? I don't know, allegedly pushing a kid over. Is that even true? Actually, that's a really good question. Let's have a look. I might put myself down there. So we're going to go to Andrew Lambing pushing kid over. Oh, it is interesting. He does apologise. He never says he doesn't do it. Do I really want to go to the Courier Mail and read it? No, not really. Did he? Okay. Did he accidentally push him over? Who does a fun run and then pushes kids over? He pushed a child out of the way during a fun run, But it's straight after that his actions that really had the 12-year-old's mother fuming. In 2018. Oh, look, don't know what to tell you. I think if you went digging, this guy probably has a list, an arm's length of questionable alleged behaviour. How do we vote in here in the States, in Europe, people who are so different in their value systems, in what they believe is important in the world, getting ahead at any cost, pushing a 12-year-old over, taking photos, upskirting an employee of a I don't know where it was, bakery or something that he was visiting, and posting them online. In what world is that acceptable? Well, I guess it's in the world where men rule politics and men are in power in Parliament House. One of the questions I had the other day was, with no women to advise our Prime Minister, how is he going to take the lead in the stories of all these rapes and things happening, the so-called prayer or meditation room being used for sexual things? How will he be able to connect into those communities to find out what's important to do and what's not important to do? And he's fixing it by reshuffling the few women he does have on board, adding one more woman in, and creating a task force, which is basically another meeting for them to go to and write memos about what's being done and how things are being done. You can't have a strategy if you don't have those people on board. It's like when the government came out with strategies for our Indigenous population, but hadn't actually spoken to any of the Indigenous groups, or and the flip side of that is, if you're not talking to the women and you're not talking to the Indigenous groups and you're not talking to these minorities. I mean, women are a minority of 50% of the population, but whatever. The flip side of that is the people you are listening to, the people who are there all the time, are the people like Andrew Laming, who apologises for pushing over a 12-year-old in a fun run, and who goes out on leave and to take empathy training because of what he's posting on Facebook. So, I don't think that's useful to any society, any community, online community, offline community, to have that kind of echo chamber happening. The interesting thing with social media is that it's absolutely not an echo chamber. We meet people on social media that don't agree with us and attempt to fix us, and we meet people that we don't agree with and we try to fix them and their opinions. What is an echo chamber are when you have all white men in power. There's an echo chamber between journalists and politicians. In fact, there's in online communities, we call this the membership cycle, and it's also known as the elder pathway. So often what will happen is there'll be a journalist, the journalist is in the press gallery, the journalist is writing articles about local politics and then picks up national, and they have a pathway, a career pathway. And then a number of things can happen. One is they leave journalism and they'll go and work as a press secretary, media advisor, media training, something for the politicians. And then the politicians themselves sometimes come with a journalism background. I can't remember now how many of them have a journalist background, but I did look into it at one point. And if they don't, and then the completion of the cycle is once they finish in politics, then they sometimes move into journalism. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you might want to have a look at Mark Latham. Who does he write for now? I think it's News Corp, isn't it? Might say it on Wikipedia. I really don't want to go digging into his website. These things are always horrible. Oh, he's with One Nation. Prominent political and social commentator. So a political and social commentator is basically a troll with a title. Because they know if they're not divisive, look, they've even called the show Outsiders. If they're not divisive, then they don't get viewers. And the Outsiders is Sky News trolling ABC Public News insiders. So, is social media the cause of all the social unrest and issues today? I don't think so. I think it exacerbates in the sense that we're now aware of the fact that people don't think like us. So rich white men in politics are starting to understand that women want to be financially secure, physically secure, mentally secure. And by the way, so do other groups. And would I take social media away in some cases? No. I want to know what the pub chatter is. So when I'm working with politicians and councils and government departments and things like that, I'd actually rather eavesdrop than not know. It would be nice to go through life not knowing, but that's not how it works. Social media monitoring, online community monitoring, don't call it social media monitoring, call it ear to the ground or the pub test or something like that, because at the end of the day, social media is like the telephone. We don't blame the telephone if we have a bad news phone call. I hate that phone. That phone rang today and it told me nasty things. Like, we don't say that. I hate Facebook. Facebook called me today and told me nasty things. That's not true either. There are people at the other end of this conversation. Do I think there needs to be more regulation? Yes. But we're putting the fox in the hen house. So when journalists troll for a living, and they particularly troll social media because they're in competition with social media. So when heritage media goes up against social media, there's an issue there. You know what I'm saying? So they're going to demand regulations. Politicians would like us to shut up. What was the thing that ScoMo said? Scott Morrison, sorry, our Prime Minister, the quiet Australian or something. I'm just going to take a quick drink here. What do you think? Do you think you're a quiet Australian? Did I say quiet American before? I meant quiet Australian. Although The Quiet American's one of my favourite books. Graham Greene. I need to read more of his stuff. It's always insightful into community and outsiders and insiders. He compared the quiet Australians to Robert Menzies' Forgotten People and John Howard's Battlers. I don't think they're that quiet. In my communities, some of the most engaged, always actually, the most engaged people are retirees for a start. Time-rich, opinionated, and have been through the elder cycle. So they are the equivalent of sitting on the stoop, chewing baccy and telling the world what they think. And they're using social media for that. I understand that. Should they be quiet? These are Australians that work hard every day. They have their dreams. They have their aspirations to get a job. Good luck with that. There's 93 people for every job at the moment, and they've stopped JobKeeper. To get an apprenticeship, to start a business, to meet someone amazing, yeah. To start a family, to buy a home. Really? Buy a home? Not in Sydney. To work hard and provide the best you can for your kids. So, newsflash, you can't do this. You can't save for your retirement and ensure that when you're in your retirement that you can enjoy it because you worked hard for it. You can't do any of those things if you're a quiet Australian. If you do not use social media to at least talk back, you've got no chance of achieving any of these things. And this is one of the issues that I have, is that we're often told that, oh, social media is just for people complaining. But what happens is we get insights from the complaints, and we can also force things to be addressed. If you don't believe me, think about the chances of the Four Corners live export episode, which, by the way, was the lowest viewed episode live ever in the 25-year history of Four Corners. Think about that if there hadn't have been social media. People started complaining. And because Twitter picked up on the live export story, which, you know, comes and goes, it's finished. It appears, it gets a repeat. Maybe people would watch it on iView and then they move on. But it got so much traction on Twitter that it became one of the largest downloaded clips ever. I think Chase's Osama bin Laden comedy clip was more downloaded, but this one was a close second or third. And so social media flipped that story from being something, nobody wants to watch abattoirs while they're having dinner. I think that's the message from the original Four Corners story. That's why it wasn't being watched. And then social media picked it up, forced it front and center, and it ends up in a Senate inquiry. I remember when Steve Wozniak from Apple said, has anybody driven, I won't say it, but a brand of a car and had the brakes fail? And thousands of people said yes. And then people started posting up the standard letter they got, which said, you are the only person that's had brake failure on this car. So the car company, very well-known global car company, out and out lied with, ironically, the same letter to every single person that had brake failure. And there had been deaths. And there's a program where I can tap into what's trending on Twitter and then watch the stock prices of the companies being mentioned going up and down in real time. And I watch the stock price from that company absolutely plummet. So don't ever be convinced. Don't ever let people tell you that complaining, cancel culture is a bad thing. It may be the only thing that we have. We vote in politicians on promises that they have no intention of keeping. And when we call them on it, they say, I want to do that, but the party's decided to do something else, like non mea culpa. And I think that's unacceptable. Not me, them. Who's them? Who talks to them? Who convinces them to do things? So every time we vote on a lie. Why are we voting? Oh, I'm voting to exercise my rights, even though I know that I won't get the things that this mob promised me. Vote. I'm not saying don't vote. Absolutely vote. But just recognize it for what it is. Cancel culture is aligned with something else that we talk about, which is first world problems. And both of these are pejorative terms, negative. Oh, you're not allowed to, that's just a first world problem, or you're just doing cancel culture. Cancel culture and first world problems are two sides of the same coin, and it has to do with calling corporates, organizations, businesses, governments, not-for-profits, and hold them to account. So if I enter into a contract with a company and that contract is something like I pay them some money and in return I get a product or service, and then that product or service is not up to scratch, if I complain about it and then somebody yells at me and says, oh, that's just a first world problem, well, yeah, sure, third world people may not have an issue with a Mercedes, but if I've spent $250,000 of my hard-earned money on a Mercedes, then I have a right to complain. And it's almost this reverse snobbery thing. By the way, I don't have a $250,000 Mercedes. I don't have a Mercedes at all. I have a 20-year-old Land Rover. Land Rover. Which is still going strong. I just had it fixed and it's awesome. If you can't afford your car in cash, you can't afford a car. So that's what I get in cash. Where were we? Cancel culture. It's illegal in Australia to do cancel culture. It's part of the regulations. That inciting other people to do cancelling. So you cannot ask other people to cancel. So I can say, hey, I'm cancelling XYZ. But I can't say you should cancel XYZ and not use them anymore. Which I would really like to see tried out in court. I think that if a company has a marketing and PR budget to spin stories to us, we should be allowed to spend our own attention, our own money in a reverse spin. And if we're not getting truthiness from companies, then we need to be able to provide truthiness to our compatriots. Do I think that people should go on a Facebook page or other social media and trash a small business down the road? No, I don't. I think that a small business will learn what works or what doesn't, and so many of them go out of business anyway, that if they don't provide good service, they'll fold or fall over. I do have a problem when I say something like we've got a doctor's near us, and we've been to this doctor numerous times for blood tests and different things, and I would say 9 times out of 10, like literally, all right, let's give the actual number. I think it's 5 times out of 6. They've lost the blood test. The blood tests haven't shown up at the hospital or at the specialist or at the MRI or wherever the blood tests have to go. They've not appeared. Once out of 6 times they did. And when I said that to somebody local, they're terrible. Nobody goes there. I'm like, what's happening here? And so if somebody says to you, I don't like social media is bad, this cancel culture's, wrong, and we shouldn't have cancel culture, I want you to talk to them about the missing step. And the missing step is where somebody goes down some stairs in the middle of the night or not paying attention or whatever, and they fall over because there's a step missing and they break their leg. And then everybody turns to them and says, well, yes, of course, we all know about the missing step. We all know about the missing stair. So all the locals know not to go to this doctor's. And actually it was interesting because I walked past them and I heard some backpackers come out and say, weren't they terrible? Is this what Australian medical services are like? And I felt like jumping and going, no, it's just them. But of course, I'm complicit because by not speaking up, I'm not pointing out the missing stair. I'm not putting a sign up saying there's a missing stair. The missing stair is really this analogy for cancel culture. If you're buying a product because they said it's vegan and then somebody proves that it's not vegan, should they speak up? Possibly. Is there a middle level between cancel culture and that kind of abrupt truthfulness versus some sort of a polite warning, but make up your own mind? That tends to be where I sit with things. So when people say to me, you never use XYZ social media product, in the back of my mind, I'm like, absolutely not. But I'll try and say something like, I don't use it because I need tools that do X, Y, and Z, and these tools don't do that. Rather than just, it's horrible, it's hideous. That partiality, impartiality, and navigating the middle ground there as well. I just want to check on Twitter because, David, yeah, thanks. Let me put this one up. The biggest trolls on the planet are media and politicians. Yeah. And so when you hear media talking about that social media is full of trolls, and you hear politicians saying social media is full of trolls, it's probably worth looking at their own behaviours. What I should do is get every major politician that said this in some form or another, and then put up all the headlines and the quotes about how they've spoken about others. Now, some trolls are just adorable. They're funny, and in the political space in particular, they are the equivalent of the court jester from hundreds of years ago, whose job was to troll the king or queen with the truth. You know, the emperor's new clothes and all that kind of stuff. So the court jester would point and laugh and make a joke, a cutting joke, and it would help correct society's imbalance with the 1%. I guess what's that term in movies when a character in the movie or the TV show is playing the viewer, like is saying the things the viewer's thinking? I forget what it's called. It's like breaks the fourth wall. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you don't, I don't know. So for me, Paul Keating played that role. If you've ever looked up Paul Keating's insults, he was or is a troll par excellence. I'm not saying that right, but who cares? Put him down like a faithful old dog, give him a Valium, use scumbags, he's going troppo. It's like spot the eyebrow, all tip and no iceberg. Could not operate a tart shop. We used to say couldn't operate a knocking shop. No, I never used to say that, but I've heard other people say that. Unrepresentative swirl, slithering mangy maggot. I miss those kind of trolly politicians. We almost got it with Trump. Almost got a very interesting troll in politics, but unfortunately he sort of, the early days were interesting and then he went a little bit too loopy, a little bit too out there. Don't you think intelligent insults are better than basic compliments? I think I'd rather an intelligent insult. Feel free to intelligently insult me. This is one thing that I think the algorithm needs to fix. On social media, behavioral management, behavior modification occurs as we learn and game the algorithms. So we learn what the algorithm wants, we start to obey that. So for instance, the semantic engine, is it lexicon or deep text? One of those has sections in it around sentiment analysis. And so if you write something passionate on social media, I love this, I hate this, it's going to get into more news feeds, then we, the company, would like to announce that. And as people wake up and realize that, they tend to they become the social media equivalents of opinion radio show hosts. I'm talking about the Bolts here, the Miranda Devines, who are the American ones? The fellow on Fox News. It starts with T. I can't think. Somebody mentioned the other day that he might run for president at the next election. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. Or maybe you don't. But the most opinionated are the ones that get the most traction on social media. And the reason for that is the engagement part of the algorithm is much, much higher than the subscriber part. So if people react, like, share, comment in some way, if they play the video, if they expand the photo, or even if they just pause on it and there's eye tracking and read it, then that's considered engagement, and then it floods into more feeds. If people just scroll past because it's boring, then it doesn't matter if they subscribe, they will stop seeing that stuff in the future because they keep scrolling past it. So what happens when people on social media discover that the more trolly they are, the more outraged people are, the more people engage? What happens when brands figure this out? Well, I looked at the analytics decades ago, maybe 15 years ago, and there was quite a few reports that said when people disagree with each other online, they come back 8 times more often, I guess, to see what the other person's saying. And they stay 5 times as long. And when you think about the fact that Facebook, face crack, is trying to keep us addicted, keep us on Facebook. We even take it to the loo with us if we're in the middle of an argument. Or is that just me? It's probably just me. Then we tend to see that the more divisive we are, the more ranty we are, the more we can upset the opposition, the more, if it bleeds, it leads, then we are going to get more engagement, which means our stuff is going to be seen by more people. So we're not just weeing into the wind. And I think that sort of reward is an issue. At the moment, the reward is on more followers. So all the questions on social media are, how do I get more followers? How do I get more subscribers? How do I get more connections on LinkedIn? How do I get more likes, subscriber likes on Facebook? Now the Facebook's shifting across and showing engagement, and Instagram is showing engagement, and there seems to be a general move towards engagement. People are going to say, how do I get more engagement? And one way is to take on the shock jock voice. So whether you're an individual or a small business or an organisation or a political commentator or heritage media or a politician, the more divisive you are, the more engagement you'll get. Now, I do split up content calendars into 3 or 4, 5, I think it is actually, different sections. So I don't want to go through that. I've got videos on that. But if you're doing story time, then it needs to be an emotical. Your article needs to be emotional, and you need to use your emotion words. And that is an issue with social media, because the more we use emotion words, the more manipulative things can be, and the less impartial, more partiality there. But definitely emoticals and narrative arcs for like story time content is important. With that, we can do those quick bites. So snappy, confrontational, abrasive, shock jock kind of headlines and bites will work. And, you know, if you're ever stuck for it, just go and read a whole bunch of Paul Keating's insults and watch what he said and listen to the little spiel, and you'll understand that sort of encapsulating a key point in the most dramatically trolly language you can possibly imagine. I do feel let down by One Nation and the Mark Lathams and stuff of the world. I think that they don't really get the hook right. They need some writers. If you're going to go down that route, if you're going to be the trolley politician, the shock jock politician, then you need to get some good script writers. Although I think Paul Keating's was just natural, so there you go. Another narrative arc, though, and one that I'm personally work on more. In fact, I'm going to do a bunch of videos on this, live lectures, starting Thursday at 1 p.m, which I'm calling Edu Social. And it's, instead of presenting something as entertainment or emoticals, there's another voice you can take, which is it's a little bit more vanilla, but you can still be interesting, you can still be entertaining, but educational with it. So instead of just ranting, use the storytelling abilities to be educational. The most engaged communities are not the trolley and if it bleeds, it leads, and shock jock and that sort of sassy voice. It's actually the educational community. So when brands or organizations create online courses or a space for training that's useful to that community, they have longevity. They have people contributing questions and answers. The behaviors are much better modified because people are there not to go on a rant. That's what Reddit's for. But they're there to attend the live streaming webinars. And when I say education, I'm not talking about a politician educating people about policies. And I'm not talking about the CEO educating customers about branding or their role in the community. I mean, literally finding out what the issues are for the community and then resolving them. I remember Ford trucks. Before Facebook, it was when forums were popular. Ford trucks started a gardening and sort of livestock and farming agriculture community, because they knew that the people who bought Ford trucks, utes and things like that often had market gardens or had a small amount of property or something like that they were using, to run out to the countryside and have livestock and grow things. Or I don't know, I grew up on a farm, but I think I've blanked most of that out. And it was such an interesting idea and it worked so well. They initially brought in their staff to just talk about gardening and that helped populate it with content. And then it was launched to the public, who really took to it because it was a content strategy, not a promotion strategy. But of course, what happens is brand awareness stays with people. So when somebody came into the forum and said, I heard that this is a good forum for talking about managing livestock, and then I've just bought some land and I need to buy a ute or a utility or some kind of truck, what do you recommend? It's natural for people to say, for Ford to be the key branding in that space. Certainly more than competitors that are not doing the same thing. I've just realised the sun's just come out and really, really lit me up. So, hey-ho. Last couple of points, because we're at the hour. We talk a lot about social media being negative. We talk about it not being supportive. We talk about those narrative arcs that are around entertainment and shock jock and getting attention. We don't talk enough about the educational part of social media, whether it's helping people who have market gardens and and might want a Ford truck in the future, or any kind of other educational, edu-social sort of communities. But I also want to point out that there's a vast number of people who are lonely. And I'm not just talking about the pandemic, although definitely during the pandemic, but who are disconnected from family and friends at a distance, who may be at-home carers of terminally ill people, or people who are at home with a chronic illness. There are rural remote area workers. They could be RAN, remote area nurses, up on the Torres Strait, or they could be out in the outback or somewhere else in the bush. They could be jackaroos and jillaroos working on stations. There could be people who are in isolation for a whole range of other reasons. There are people who don't speak English well, who are here studying or trying to learn English or something like that. And the list goes on. And these people are the quiet Australians. They don't get to talk except on social media. And you could say, oh, why don't they just pick up the phone? Well, first of all, the phone is not convenient. You end up playing telephone tag with people. You don't get to speak to the person you want to speak to in real time. But there is something lovely about leaving a message and waking up in the morning on social media, waking up in the morning and having a response. I wouldn't call somebody at 3 a.m, maybe because I think they might have their phone on, and then hope that there'll be a response when I wake up. But I definitely would social them and see if they want to respond, or if they're going to respond in that time. For people who don't have an individual to call, visit, or social media with, joining groups is a fundamental part of staying connected. And we are social creatures. I don't know. I don't think I've helped at all people understand the importance of social media or not. I don't know if I've changed your mind at all. I do think we're at that tweens stage. I think we were at the beginning of a relationship. You know that honeymoon phase when somebody that you really like says, hey, do you want to go on a date with me? Let's go out to dinner. Where would you like to go? And then you say, oh, I don't mind. You choose. And they go, no, you choose. And they go, no, you choose. And then you choose. And that goes on for half an hour because it's cute and you're in a new relationship. It doesn't last. We're in the next phase. We're in the honey, we've got to talk phase. We looked like everybody agreed, but we're starting to understand we don't agree on anything. And we're also learning how to debate. We're learning what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. How these politicians think that some of the things they're posting up online is acceptable, I have no idea. How they think some of their behaviours won't come out. How they think taking photos of themselves having sex and posting them to a private Facebook group won't come out, I have no idea. But this is the kind of tweens behaviour that we need to get through. We need to become adults in our communication. And I'm definitely not one of those. So I'm on here ranting. So clearly I'm not one of those. I'm still a tween. If we block social media, if we block discussion, if we put the responsibility for censoring discussions on American corporations instead of into the right hands, which is local, national, regulatory, we will end up with, first of all, we'll end up with corporate America running what we can and can't say. Hi Facebook, hi Twitter, hi LinkedIn. Yes, I'm aware of your censorships. And I think that's super dangerous. It's interesting to me that they're censoring politicians, and politicians are not bringing in regulations to manage this phase in our evolution. I know it's difficult. It is difficult. It's difficult to sit down at a dinner party and realize you've got the whole evening ahead of you with people that maybe you don't share their values. At least on social we can block them and move on. We don't, by the way, very rarely. I do think that as we head out of this phase, it will unite humanity. I know it looks like we're not uniting at the moment, and we are definitely dividing, but we're dividing along fault lines that have been there for millennia. Women have always had this issue. Women have always been under a curfew. We've always been told, don't go out late at night, always have a chaperone, don't drink in public, don't get drunk, don't try and walk home on your own. We've always been under a curfew. So have, Black Lives Matter reflect back on that for that part of the population as well. And we're starting to really see it now. And this is key. We're not only seeing it, social media is not only, what do I want to say? We're having reflected back at us paradigms that we've not questioned. Well, of course she shouldn't have gone out and got drunk and then walked home through the park on her own. And then we have to say, stop, listen. Is that the right thing to say? Should the curfew be on women? And, I've been a smart ass and I said the curfew should be on men, because if they're the ones causing it, men should not be allowed out after 10 o'clock. They should not be allowed in places where there's alcohol or women. And they should not be allowed out on their own, and they should not be allowed out with a chaperone. And definitely, if you want to then take that into politics, these politicians, these political advisors, these staff members, one of them allegedly raped that young girl in the office of one of the ministers, and then the others in the meditation and prayer room, and all what's going on there, and going into the offices of women politicians and doing disgusting things on the desks and things like that. It's almost as though the frat boys have not yet grown up and had their behaviours reflected back at them. My question always is, when you reflect behaviours back at people, do they truly understand that it's not acceptable, or do they realise they're now in a bigger pond and they have to go with the flow of these fishies, not with their naughty, and I'm doing air quotes because I'm sure that's how they see it, not with their naughty friends? If social media is doing anything at all, it's definitely not only putting a pin light on the other people around us to show us that they have a different point of view. Oh, they don't think like me, do they? But it's also holding a mirror up to us so we can understand what social constructs, what social contracts we've accepted and are fighting for that may need to change. I don't know. I think that's up to you to decide. I struggle with it. If you want to know what true impartiality is, social media managers, online community managers, Facebook admins, not of groups, but actual brand admins, are absolutely impartial. So it's important that it's a level playing field for all the members, and that they don't feel that the admins are leaning one way or another. And so sometimes we have to say and do and ban people for things that actually we agreed with, but they didn't meet the guidelines and the house rules and all that kind of stuff. So always interesting to see how other communities feel about things. And never ever think it's one person. For every person you meet, you're meeting their network. And so they represent a group of people that they know would agree with them on whatever that point is. There you go. All right, so Thursday 1 p.m. is the Edu Social series, and just like the government series, just like the university series, there'll be about 6 weeks worth of live lectures on how to build an educational voice in your social media so you don't need to go into troll marketing and entertainment marketing and into shock jock marketing, that voice. You don't need to do that. Yes, it gets more traction. It's not the only voice out there, though, that does. All right. I'm going to have to love you and leave you. Monday, 10:45 a.m. Sydney time, social media news. This one. And then Thursdays is the lecture series, and you can catch up on everything on my blog, laurelpapworth.com, if you want links to any of the things I've shown you today. Hope you found this interesting, and I will see you in the next session. Thanks.